Good tidings, fellow friends of the world! It's Zeklo, and welcome to another Heartbound theory. If you haven't figured it out by now, I am super hyped for this game. So I've decided to try and tackle another subject. What is the artifact? Now the game has a demo update planned, supposedly soon, but that doesn't come out yet at the time of this video's release, or at least recording. So, we don't really have any new information apart from a few new ARG pages, but those mostly cover stuff that's going to occur in the future of the game. While the previous video I put out has plenty of issues, I would still recommend watching it because it covers the important concept that the game takes place in a time loop. Why does this matter? For the simple fact that before we can tackle the question at hand, first we must figure out one detail. If the game takes place in a time loop, then what happened to lore after reaching the end of the previous timeline? In a lot of cases, the person at hand is aware they're in a loop. That doesn't seem to be the case for lore. In other circumstances, we, the player or viewer, are aware, which is kind of the case considering the theory, but not really. The last typical occurrence is that the individual in question is present in the new timeline. We talked about it a little bit in the last video, but basically, people are assuming that Binder is lore in the future. And that could be correct. However, there's one important point, and that's the fact that Binder doesn't recognize Baron. It's possible becoming an anomaly, Darksider, or whatever can cause memory disconnects in others, or maybe specifically Guardians, or who knows. We don't really know, and so I can't commit to a theory like that. Okay, so who then? Well, what's the topic of the video? Figuring out what the artifact is. Or rather, who the artifact is. Their lore. Now that's a bit of a strange thing to say, isn't it? So let me explain. An important part of stories, especially those involving time shenanigans, is foreshadowing. And one of the funniest kinds of foreshadowing is the kind that's hidden in plain sight. Upon being first introduced, the artifact states, "I was like you once, full of hope, ambition, curiosity, fear." What if, just for a second, we take this at face value? We forget about what it means in context and just take it as is. The artifact is literally confessing to being like lore. Perhaps because he was lore at some point. Perhaps not. At the very least, you should start to be able to understand where I'm coming from, even if you're not fully on board yet. Let's continue with their dialogue. Now I am here, trapped in this, here in this, prison, place, waiting for you. Before the dialogue distorts, the artifact says they're trapped in this prison. Once more, just completely forget about the context. They're trapped in a prison. That doesn't necessarily have to be the room they're in. That weird spatial plane of existence? Could it? Absolutely. When I read that dialogue, that is exactly what I think. That is exactly what we're supposed to think. That doesn't mean that's what it is. What if the prison is the artifact itself? A book which contains lore. Alright, so before we continue this odd train of thought, we need to make some points clear about lore himself. Hopping on over to Wikipedia, we will see the line, "The game centers around a boy who deals with depression, anxiety, and fear as he embarks on a journey through different locations in search of his dog, Baron." This line was written by the lead developer himself, and there are hints in the game already that allude to this, such as when Baron says, "Has it really gotten that bad?" if you decide to throw out the Viking feast. I bring this up because lore is very susceptible emotionally. You can see this very clearly with how quickly he falls apart against the artifact's verbal assault. Now, I want to talk briefly about what people would call dream theory or cope theory, whatever you really want to call it. Basically, it's the thought that none of this is real and it's just lore trying to deal with his depression. The fact of the matter is, for this kind of story, it fits pretty well. And it's not exclusive from the theory we were just discussing. That is to say, the artifact plays the role of Lore's doubt, his self-deprecation, the version of himself that is given up, turned bitter, yada yada. So I don't really want to get into this too much, but it is technically a possibility, so we should keep that in mind. So before we wrap this up, I want to touch upon another abstract thought. So we went over the possibility that the artifact contains a previous version, or even versions, of Lore. But how did he end up like that? Who knows, but here's an idea. In the ARG, at the very first page, we are warned, no matter how bright their hearts seem, do not trust them. Who are they? Well, it's been concluded that this is most likely the artifact speaking. Whether that's true or not, who knows. As far as the demo goes, there aren't many people who Lore trusts. However, there are plenty more characters that will come in the future. That said, I think this is referring to Binder, mostly because they're one of the first characters that end up helping Lore. They're a guardian, which is represented by yellow in regard to the quote-unquote good path, also known as Glowbringer. The idea I want to leave with you is in Binder's name. Binder. Perhaps he's holding information like a binder would. Or maybe the better way of putting it is withholding information. But I think more concerning is maybe he bound a certain boy to a certain book. The Artifact. So thank you all for tuning in. This is just a little, thing I wanted to cover. It's been on my mind for a while, and maybe it'll instill something in you when you'll have your own theories. This game is, it's got me captivated, I'm not gonna lie. I'm really curious to see where it goes. So, yeah, what do you guys think? What are your thoughts? Until then, farewells. You know, I was looking at this image. It's a really nice image. And it's got that sort of spatial background to it. We first end up seeing this when we meet the artifact. Why is Lore like that? Well, who's to say that's our Lore, and not the Lore trapped within the artifact?